The cars have been chalked.
Oh.
I had a feeling.
We don't know when,
Is
eh?
it 2 hours?
I don't know, I just checked now.
Well, I looked about half an hour ago, so
They hadn't been a half hour yet?
yeah.
So we can assume that's
Maybe we'll go for an hour and then
Then take the sponge out there.
Yeah, a water bottle and a sponge.
So, yeah.
Right.
So we're good till 2:30.
We have to go at 2 and move our car.
Yeah.
What?
Mine
Unless you wanna do it
across
now.
the street, could it possibly be longer?
Don't know.
You just
They
have to
probably just
move
go
them a
home.
little bit anyway.
Just so the chalk is underneath the car.
I'm gonna go now.
Oh, no.
Or we
but
can just get
about
some
2
wet
hours from now
cloth
it's
and
chalked.
go right wipe off the chalk.
Nothing was chalked a half hour ago.
A half hour ago, nothing?
No, Lily
So we're
checked.
live.
And
We're
now
live.
it is chalked. So I'll go check again in a little bit.
So we can go till
One.
2:30 probably.
I don't know what time it is.
It's after 1.
Oh, not true.
I'd like to keep track
I'm
of.
gonna assume it was 1 o'clock that we did it.
What's that?
Just to keep track of when they chopped
Is it
and
live
when
and
they need to go back.
I'm retarded.
It's only
or-
just, we're only here
or
for
is it
4
just
hours and they're
not?
only a 2 hour.
It's on.
basis.
Just went on.
So
Yeah.
one move.
I'm just
should
saying,
be
who's that?
okay.
No, I'm talking about from the person who's chocking's perspective, for all of the cars that they're chocking, you
Yeah, yeah.
know.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
didn't care because-
That's something to think about.
They've got to have some
Yeah.
system for
Yeah.
that.
Whoa, we whoa.
Just got a mess.
I think I figured it out. I don't know. Can you see?
No.
Yes.
Nada, huh?
So we did only just come for the food after all.
I have a question.
Go for it.
In the traditions that many of us have studied or participated in, we see a model for a realizer or awakener as the primary teacher, right? Provocateur, transmitter of the flame. And we still see that model present throughout the culture, right? In the non-dual culture, the Advaita culture, you name it, right? There's a celebrity that's recognized as an accomplisher of self-realization, enlightenment, call it what you will. And then there's a gaggle of aspirants navigating, right, through their various vicissitudes of their life experience. So what happens when there is a sufficient level of maturity or a sufficient level of first-hand experience so that a gathering like this doesn't have any calories left or interest in negotiating the myth of one's personal life or one's personal problems or the apparent obstacles between self and, awake. Do we just come for the food? I mean, is that what could, should, needs to happen next? What happens to the quality of being together or the discovery, the conversation, the enjoyment of the moment? If you could say everyone is open and available curiously to something new, something uncharted that we haven't really seen in the popular culture. Does that make question? It's kind of an evolutionary, right, suggestion.
It moves into having less and less erroneous association with the importance of content.
Yes.
Less and less erroneous association with the importance of particular packets of information.
Absolutely.
And more just about enjoyment, which is ultimately what it's about anyway.
Yeah.
And when the form that enjoyment takes can be
Right.
any way that it can be.
Yeah. Any way it shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Dessert.
spirituality looks very different at different points of its arc.
Yeah.
One could assert.
Mm-hmm.
And at certain points of its arc, it may have a tendency to look like what looks like information gathering or refining or polishing or devaluing.
Suffering, amelioration.
Various modes.
Sure.
And this continuing to look different at different points. There's no reason that shouldn't continue indefinitely, as the arc continues indefinitely, as of course it must.
Yeah, it must, right.
But the whole, beyond a certain point, the whole notion of discrete anything becomes much less relevant. And so discrete information or discrete questions or discrete issues becomes less and less, points of engagement,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps.
Radiance, word that we've used is delightful. It's immersive. It's nourishing and satisfying. Right? It renders unto the restless beast a certain kind of inner quiescence, and that's its yogic nature.
Everything. Well, all nature is its nature,
Yeah.
of course, and it freely gives of its superabundant world without end. Amen.
Amen. Yeah.
I really enjoy hearing different people's experiences and ways things happen for them. Just all of that. It's always in some way different than anything I've dreamt up or involved with so far. So it's always beautiful. Really, I enjoy it. I love it. Could say instructive, but it's not about any particular thing except sort of the different ways you can move.
How about illuminative?
illuminative. Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Well, there's no pressure for improving upon the social conformist agreement, right? There's no pressure for we should start schools, or we should do this, financially, or do this with respect to communications, or right? There's no inherent, we'll call it revolutionary activism. That
certainly not from me, but have at
yeah,
it.
certainly not from the likes of you. Yeah.
The floor is open.
God forbid.
I think if we were all had young children, then schools would be important.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And we actually don't have, in a possessive way, anything that's important anymore, except our lives and our health, perhaps.
Yeah.
And our
gluten-free
families, and but that stuff doesn't lead to revolution.
Yeah.
Not exactly. Sitting in this position over here, there's a sense of, I hear you definitely, but there's certainly a sense of more access in a way to being the trajectory of something that wants to do itself, whatever, create, do whatever's true for it. And for me, there's things to be done, whether it's doing the dishes or creating a school. And it's just that it's not personal. There's no you have to. There's no grand mission about it. Hopefully, there's not much ego, but there's there's something that's out there creating. Let's say, Does that make sense? Yes.
Well, it's very curious to, have an experience where there's not a big motivation to participate in more or less anything at all.
Well, do you think that maybe that's temperamental too? Some people by nature have ambitions. In other words, they have drive. They have a lot of inspiration that sort of seems to drive their activity.
Yeah.
Whereas some of us don't have that sort of ambition or drive to do anything in particular that could be translated as a school or some endeavor. But I can see very easily how for some it's like being just a different nature, an apple tree versus an oak. Some people just have that drive. And Peter's a very driven person. When he wants to learn an instrument, he doesn't stop until he's learned it. Me, I'll try it out, get the gist of how it goes, and then what's the next thing? So it's two very different temperaments, and I can see what Avi is saying. If you have the drive and it's in your nature, then it's a difference between one creature or another, one creative manifestation or another. But they're all inherently creative. You don't have to look any particular way on the outside. And I think having the clarity of what this is does allow more free flow in a way, in a sense. But it's only apparent. I don't think it's in reality, because I think it was always free flowing. It was never obstructed. So it's sort of a moot point. There's never been any obstruction, only apparent. Philosophical, perhaps. What do you think?
Well, just for fun, you wonder what a pandemic of radiant presence might do to the species, to the culture, how we conduct ourselves.
Well, it's a curious question, because in one sense that has always been the case, and nothing but that has always been the case, and this is what it's doing.
Yes.
This in the
You're
macro
right.
sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, in a
Yeah.
in a more explicit sense that you may be meaning, who knows?
Yeah, it's a who knows, really.
It's always that.
You know, but to my observation, historically, you know, it's always been at least just de facto, it's always been essentially hierarchical, that the proportion of people that are engaged with more and more subtle aspects of the radiance
Yes.
becomes vanishingly smaller and smaller and smaller as it becomes more and more refined. And to my eye, that seems to have been historically the case, you know, as far as is known,
Yeah.
and seems to be the case now. You know, again, my observation.
Yeah.
And so who knows? You know, the fantasy of a golden age or a universal awakening or something, hey, you know, all bets are off, anything can happen. But
Yeah.
historically, that hasn't seemed to have been the case. This has seemed to have been generally a kind of a self-regulating, self-specializing, you know, a self-created elite, not an elite that is setting out to be an elite, but just numerically because of the vanishing small percentage of people that have the whatever, the interest or capacity or misfortune or good fortune or whatever to be interested in this stuff on a you know, a very refined level.
Well, what's interesting to me though is that you know, taking as a given what you just said, Peter, there's this sense of, you know, let's say the elite, you know, earthly manifestors as having an aspect of magic to manifest in the way that they do. And so-called spiritual people not necessarily being always interested in melding what you're talking about with earthly manifestation. Make sense?
Sure.
So, you know, that's a curiosity for me of you know, can you be both? Can you do both? Can you be interested in both? Or once you realize that, oh, it's all it, oh, I'm going to sit back on the couch. You know, or
No.
you know,
That's too.
Well, to my observation, there's no rules, there's no laws. The intrinsic nature of what this is seems to, I mean, the very strange fractal nature of structure, the way in which particularities are universalities and vice versa. So, you know, moving a cup from the table to my hand is at the same time very, very actively and very immediately and concretely participating in, you know, astrophysical event and so on and so forth. So the scale of, let's just say, the potential scales of what engagement should look like are so open relative to a simplistic idea of materialistic involvement or, you know, explicit materialistic manipulation.
Yeah.
But again, all bets are off, and that's, you know, that's just an observation that, you know, as the bizarre, nonlinear, fractal interrelatedness of all things becomes more and more concrete to one immediately. You know, not philosophically, but just as a fact. You know, the perspective of what constitutes effective involvement, you know, may be very vastly open-ended in many ways, but nothing is precluded, of course. You know, who knows? Huh? And again, who knows? You know, there is not a way to assess. You know, it may be that great luminaries who are historical movers and shakers, and, you know, real powerhouses of manifestation and all that may have a very profound realization. You know, who knows?
Well, to go into the whole notion of an evolutionary outbreak of self-realization, like you know, an Eckhart Tolle might refer to in New Earth or something like that.
If only we could get rid of these damn pain bodies.
Yeah, really. Right. Well,
Maybe just a vaccine or something, you know, might be developed.
Ebola sounds yeah, like a useful intervention.
I recommend sleep.
I like that.
Yeah,
Works for me.
Sleep and
Well
ibuprofen.
done.
Well, it becomes very strange because in order to play around with evolvement and or the let's say expanding presence of awakened appreciation already presupposes a kind of a reality that this is not. Yes? Because I mean, if this moment is just this moment, and all of everything is doing just this moment for each and every so-called primate, right, in a profoundly, provocatively, unimaginably individuated manner for their exact experience, then there is no fucking universe, planet, or any place else but, right?
And there's absolutely, and I mean really, just absolutely no way to assess what the status of anything is anyway.
No.
So to define this as being not a universal realization is like, prove it.
Yeah.
You
right.
know?
Yeah.
Maybe this is what that looks like.
Yeah, prove that this is not the golden age that you've been waiting for.
Because again, the nature of what this is so strange.
Yeah.
And becomes so manifestly, concretely, and obviously, and self-verifyingly unresolvable.
Yes.
That you can't really hold it as being meaningfully this or that. It just becomes an empty assertion.
Yeah.
And one empty assertion is just as good as another empty assertion.
Well, this is really strange because that's as that lands in one's consciousness. I mean, you can't measure the immeasurable impact that has on one's immediate experience. I mean, it's like, wow, well then, I'll just sit here or not, or do or not do anything. There's no, right?
Or go get a beer,
there's
or
no
go to work,
utility or takeaway, or something that could possibly be a better than or an improved upon what this is already doing and liquidating in each moment.
Yeah, and yet no functionality whatsoever is excluded.
That's right.
So it can look like anything.
Do anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's completely it's essentially transparent.
Yeah.
And it has always been that way anyway.
Yeah.
And great things appear to have happened or not, you know.
I think the thing that seems to disappear is the ownership as being the doer. When you see it as energy or nature of something, it's different than saying, oh, well, I'm going to do this, or so-and-so did that. It may appear, you can give it a name to this energy manifestation. It looks a certain way, but there's really no ownership.
Of course.
Because there's no one to own it in
everything
a sense,
is
in a real
everything,
sense.
and everything does everything.
Being done.
No matter how you put that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can parse that verbally and descriptively any way you want.
Sure.
You know, say Beth made the chai is really a way of saying everything makes everything.
Yeah.
This made Beth make the chai.
You know, the particular is the universal, and the universal is the particular.
Right.
In a literal, concrete, fractal, interconnected sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, which subsumes the notion of individuals with karma or predilection.
But without excluding that as a point of interface.
Yeah.
But going back to the word assessment, it's like that word, for me, gets dropped. There is no assessment possible. You drop it, you become transparent, and then when you were saying about the individual is the big, small, it's all of it all the time. Greg and I have been, we coin magic words basically.
Yeah.
Sometimes in conversations with Jeff, I'm like, oh good, magic words are flowing back and forth and we know what each other means, but who else would know? And maybe we don't even really know, but it seems like we do. And, it's like, oh, whoa, there's the center of the universe. That's what Greg and I were talking about. Oh no, there's the center of the universe again. Wow, it's there too. It's really great. And, it's all that. But it's just so much fun. as you were saying.
Yeah.
It's just more fun.
Fun.
More fun.
Fun.
You know.
Fun.
Yeah.
We like fun.
But the thing is that for me, it doesn't, I don't just go, okay, now I just get to sit here. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do this. Oh,
Yeah.
it's like the
Nothing
doing
is
is really
excluded.
freed up because
Yeah.
there's no have to, there's no great big plan. It's transparent.
Hmm.
Who
But
knows
you-
what's going to happen?
You would
But-
never sit and say, oh, I'm not
Yeah.
going to do anything now, because it's not your nature.
No.
So,
But still, there's, my past memory of this dream of a human, there's a certain kind of fear or whatever around, oh, can I do this or can I do that, or will the world allow this or that or whatever, and now it's not there. It's just dropped. It's just gone. It's like, and whatever it is, if it's just speaking to someone or if it's
yeah.
going out and starting a school, as Jeff suggested, it doesn't matter what it is.
You made that suggestion.
Yeah, nothing is excluded. The radiance is everything, is anything, is all of its modes, and more. So, particularity and universality are not opposites, which is very strange because universality seems to be a meeting of absolute, essentially unified inclusiveness, and particularity indicates absolute differentiation.
Yeah.
And how can that not be an opposition? Well, it happens that it isn't.
Yeah.
So that's how it cannot be, because it isn't. But that so all particular divergencies are modes of universal inclusiveness.
Yeah.
And so that's what it is, how it is. And you look around and that's what you see, so no surprise.
You won't discern a boundary between convergence and divergence.
No, because they're one and the same. There is only one thing, so
Yeah.
to speak, that is in one mode that looks like
Yeah.
anything it can look like and does look like.
Yeah.
But it never departs from itself. It never actually becomes either particular or universal. It's always just something that seems that way if it does.
When it does, for however long it might. I mean, it's a buzzkill for the Enlightenment game.
Yeah.
Not.
What
Or
do you
not.
mean?
Yeah.
Super booster for the enlightenment.
I paid all this money and I got enlightened just to discover I didn't need to pay all this money and get enlightened.
Yeah.
And I didn't even get this damn t-shirt. I had to buy the damn thing.
Yeah. They wouldn't even give me the t-shirt.
I know, right?
Been there, done that.
I think there's a big difference between searching and accepting.
Sure.
And even if you don't find anything that you thought you were looking for, there's a relaxation.
Sure. Well, searching and accepting may just be the same thing, the same engagement that may appear with different emphases at different phases of its functioning. What can look like an insane, insatiable quest for fulfillment at one point the exact same engagement can look like a fat and happy contentment. And it's not that the one necessarily disappeared and the other is somehow a result of that. It's just essentially the same vector of engagement that just continually morphs as its mode develops through its own spontaneous unfoldment. And this continually is spontaneously unfolding. That's what we got. Nothing stays the same.
Particularization doesn't end or cease or even get quieter. It's curiouser than that. It's like there's no, one is not engaged in the reflexive universe creation, right, as a consequence of particularization.
I'm not sure I follow that.
There's no investment, right?
Yeah, there's no investment, but there's no investment in there being no investment either. So
Well,
you know.
that's why there's really no investment.
Oh, really no investment?
Yeah, that's
oh,
right. I forgot the really, the whatsoever. No investment whatsoever. Yeah.
Whatsoever.
Forgot
yeah.
the qualifier.
Yeah, the whatsoever is important.
Yeah.
Gotta
Now I
slip that in there.
Well, I don't know, you know, it's like we all have our own words that sort of, you know, mean something to us, or sort of mean something to us out of the trajectory of what we're seeing that cannot be put into words. And, you know, there's this like really fun thing that just very recently happened for me, that I started to feel like thoughts were coming that had never come before. I was familiar with my thoughts. There was like an evolution of my thoughts, an evolution of realization. There was like this evolution that seemed familiar somehow, even when it was new, even when it was exciting. And then all of a sudden there was this turn, and I was like, whoa, that is not my thought. That is a totally different world. And one of them is, there is no God. And like, there is no God. That is not obvious. That is like not obvious that who is that?
Parasite.
Realizing that there is no God. And then suddenly, I'm God. But not I'm God, but just like, whoa, this is the only God there is. Oh God.
Oh my God.
That's tripped. That's amazing. And it's very simple. And to me, it's the end of anything that I could call particularization. There's like, no way. No way. But I honor your word.
What?
No God. No God. I'm fascinated with this. I'm just completely fascinated with it because it's such an end to all of the story, striving, war, whatever. My complaints about reality. Those atheists, man. Or those amoralists.
There's only actuality, and actuality is just as it is. And it's beyond definition, so defining it as God or not God, or whole or partial, or complete or incomplete, or good or bad, or, you know, is an absurd partializations of something that is beyond that.
But what if you have the opposite thought of something that you really had, like, you know, for 56 years? It's sort of fun, isn't it?
Sure, of course.
It's sort of like it wipes the slate clean.
Yeah.
If you can really seriously have that thought, not just consider it as a thinker, but just like, whoa, that's reality.
Actuality is it's lovely and also kind of a slippery slope.
It's the slipperiest.
It's the slipperiest. Yeah.
Slippery as it's stock and trade.
Yeah. So what is this as actuality? If I'm not committing to anything conceptually, right? If there's no explanation, no description, no origin, right? Source, outcome, genesis. Just, oh my God, what the fuck is this? And is that commonly what we're referring to using the pointer of actuality, right? Which is, what is it? I mean, is it, we've used the word textural, you know, or occasionally rainbow body just for fun, as a way of saying what is it about or inherent in the nature of your present experience which is capable of this quality of profundity or intimacy with actuality?
Well, it is that. It is itself that, and there's not even a particular that it is. It's beyond anything. You know, when it's you know, its most manifest principle, its most obvious intrinsic principle, as near as I can see, is unresolvability,
Yeah.
which means it's unresolvable as that. It's
Yeah.
even unresolvable as being unresolvable.
Sure.
And so, and you know, the most nuanced, subtle, astounding, transcendental, nonlinear ways that it can seem to be beyond the way you seem to be approaching it as that or whatever,
Yeah.
is just another. It's not that even, because
Just
it's not.
like that-
It's not actually resolvable.
Yeah,
as
that
that.
just left town also.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
you know,
Uh-huh.
it's not absolutely not findable. It's absolutely not findable, and yet it never goes away.
Yeah.
You know.
Go figure.
And that you can't even resolve. You can't even resolve that.
Someone's excited.
You know, but it's slippery is its calling card. You know,
Yeah.
when you really explore the slipperiness of slippery,
Wow.
how slippery is slippery, and can you even know if slippery really is slippery? You know,
It has no boundary condition.
no
There's
boundary-
no limit to it. No.
no limit,
Nothing.
no limit.
Yeah.
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 No limit. So you know,
That's why you
and
skid right off the whole
well,
blade.
you skid right off, but you don't go anywhere.
It can't go anywhere.
Maybe. Who knows? Can't know whether or not you're going anywhere.
Yeah.
More unresolvability.
With infinity hidden in what? Obvious view.
Yeah, hidden in everything. Everything
Yeah.
and anything.
Yeah.
You know. Absolute infinity.
Yes.
You know, I mean, unresolvability is just an anglicization
Mhm.
of infinity.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just parsing out the implications of infinity.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute boundarylessness, absolute limitlessness.
Yeah. Well, it's very seductive because it's like, well, okay, there's all of that occurring in my subtle experience, my observant, right, experience. And it's easy to go back to the, let's say, the materialist notion of because Big Bang and because inflation and because Earth and mineralization in the periodic table, this profundity, whether the material, right, Earth or the sublimity of awake,
Sure.
are possible.
Sure, but that's not excluded.
Right.
It is that as much as it's anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are all just interface points of this. They're all actual interface points of this.
Sure.
You know, and this is not limited to that, but as interface points, all of that is actual embodiment of this.
Right. So any poetic genesis is,
Yeah.
you know, of course, included, and more the merrier.
Yeah,
Why not?
nothing is excluded.
Yeah.
You know, you can, since it's unparsable, it can be parsed, it can be, pseudo-parsed in any guise, very profoundly meaningfully.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing, go to materialism.
Sure.
You can do it.
Yeah, you can.
Go to absolute, divine manipulation and whatever,
You can do that.
narcissism. You can do that. You
Yeah.
I mean, any of these paradigms, it's like, yeah, okay, you can see it that way, and it's consistent and it holds water, and that's actually true.
Yes.
But this is itself, and even though it is true as any of its modes, it is also beyond any and all of its modes.
Yeah.
So all of its modes accurately are it, but it is not limited to any of its modes.
Yeah, there's that textural sweetness of beyond, which is
Yeah.
something other than belief or agreement.
Right. And that's where one discovers liberation as opposed to just adeptship or magical,
Yes.
magical
Right.
magicianhood.
Mm-hmm.
Say more about that right there. Comparing that to, because
Well, I'm asserting that being skillful at being able to surf paradigms is essentially magic, which is essentially manipulative. Spin doctoring, basically.
Yeah.
For fun and profit.
Yeah.
or whatever.
Right.
And the intrinsic backdoor, the intrinsic bottomlessness, which is always immediately front and center the case. In other words, any way of spin doctoring, as powerful and viable and ultimately true as it may be,
Mm-hmm.
is not it. It is it, but it's not the it. There's always more. There's always an outside. There's always a beyond. There's always a, you know, and that's where one finds liberation, where it's liberation from every and anything without excluding every and anything.
On a way, the surfing is just enjoying the energy of whatever manifestation.
Yeah, of course.
It is. I mean, it's the energy that somehow you get to slide down
Sure.
the face of that manifestation.
Sure, and that's what day-to-day life consists of, largely. That's what functionality consists of.
Which seems like a kind of magic compared to, you know, getting slogged and trashed by every wave that comes along. But, yeah.
Sure. Well, that's just unskillful magic.
Yeah. That's right.
That's being a magical patsy instead of a adept sorcerer.
It's like having a free pass to the boardwalk sideshow and getting trapped on a ride and not being able to get off.
So bodhicitta is a useful metaphor, at least in that language, to refer to this profound appreciation of infinity without measure.
Sure.
Right? Radiant mind, bodhicitta.
Sure.
Well, so how would that be, why would that be construed as compassion? Or is it just a different order of magnitude? I mean, seeing what this is.
I think the whole construction as compassion is an attempt to humanize and dumb down bodhicitta to make it available for the punters.
Yeah, right.
To make it available for the rank and file, to let them think they're doing something to keep them, on board fattening up their coffers.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
It's also been good for them to get help in doing any service of any kind.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so different.
Yeah.
It's good. And by and large, it's great. I mean, your Buddhist countries have a very peaceful, cooperative, happy, by and large population. Right. Very nice.
Once they're shooting each other.
As perhaps contrasted with certain fundamentalist Christian social environments, one might
find themselves
very
in.
happy fundamentalist Christians. Okay, they can be happy too.
Yeah. Hey, come on.
I know at least two of them. who
No
don't.
sectarianism here.
That's right.
So it's a repressing so.
Well, words change their vibration, though, in awakeness, let's say, because the compassion that it sounds like you're speaking of, when wielded by a human being, I never got that it was actually compassion. It was more like pity or manipulation or condescension or something like that. I would have, the people doing it were telling me they were compassionate. It didn't look like that to me. But when the word compassion occurred to me was when there was a certain transparency of self like a sort of like giving, almost I would say giving through the field of just like radiance, like. And then I was like, whoa, compassion, now I get it. Sort of, I get it, whatever that means. But then the word occurred to me.
Sure, true compassion is like true love. It's basically the absolute inclusiveness and intimacy of all of reality with itself, of course, because that's what it is with.
So what is it that what's the adhesion power of a molecule, of an atom, of a photon, of the entirety of phenomenal specificity and differentiation? So air and trees and water and earth and the vacuum of interstellar space. Like, what the hell? What's the blueprint for why this appears the way it appears to, we primates, through the instrumentation that we use to magnify the profound capacity of consciousness?
Yeah, that's inscrutable. Why it has this the paracrystalline structure in a relationship it has with it.
Yeah.
Why the patterns are patterned the way they seem to be patterned, to the extent they seem to be patterned the way they seem to be patterned.
Yeah. Right.
It's all like, why does it have these internal resonances that seem to present in this way?
Right.
Even though it itself is not actually constrained by these resonances, but just manifests as them, at least within the human consciousness,
The bandwidth
frequency or whatever. I mean, who knows?
Yeah,
It's all. Why is structure the way structure seems to be, to the extent it does seem to be that way?
Yeah.
And all that can really be said, as far as I can see, is that it's inherent nature that should be so.
Yeah. Well, the entire electromagnetic spectrum, right, manifests, permeates, appears to what we think we are, right, as a harmonic of that very spectrum, into what this looks like.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is, why should infinity happen to look like this?
Yeah.
And I would think the retort is, what should infinity look like?
Yeah. What should it? Yeah.
It happens to look like this.
Right.
Take it up with management.
Yeah. Help me out. Yeah. Really. You want it to look a different way? Okay. We'll turn those
Look
dials.
in the other direction. Just turn around.
Well, it's real curious then to see life on Earth, primate life on Earth being the consequence or extrusion of the marriage of elements. And it may not be that, because we're looking at something that's way more subtle, as a non-findable, call it building block, or a non-findable urge that permits the so-called electromagnetic spectrum to appear as it appears. Yeah. So it may not even be a golden age on Earth. That could be a consequence that occurs a moment from now. It could be an entirely, inscrutable and unimaginable expression of consciousness.
Well, it is that. Whatever it looks like, it is intrinsically.
It's intrinsic.
More than that.
Right.
And so what it happens to look like is just an interface point to that moreness. To the wave is an interface point to the ocean, which is an interface point to the globe, which is an interface point to the solar system, which is an interface point to the galaxy, so on and so forth.
Yeah, right.
So
to the scrim at the edge of the universe. Yeah. Well, that's strange.
Yes.
That's really fucking strange.
well, it's in the nature of. I mean, that's the really the
common sense of infinity.
It's Jacob's ladder. The fact. The revelation that all specificity is specifical interface point of universality on an infinitely hierarchical scale, depending upon how it's engaged with. It looks, how it looks, depending on how it's engaged with.
Yeah.
But this is the calling card of the paradox of the unity of specificity and universality.
Mm-hmm.
It presents as this instantaneous, infinitely hierarchical tree of life, ladder of the parts in the part in the hierarchy of greater scale and greater systems and so on
and non-durable, and still.
Yeah, and it never actually resolves as any of that. It's always just a sort of a particular angle of view. The non-related elements seem to be lined up as this, and all of a sudden it seems to be this astounding.
It's 11:11 somewhere. can we be more bold than with the the kind metaphor you've used frequently is that it's like a dream, right? To be more bold, I'm suggesting it. What do you mean it's like a dream? I mean it is dreaming, right?
You can say that, but I would I'm wary of saying it is dreaming because of the implication that might actually mean anything.
Right.
Oh.
Like a dream is nice is because it puts you right
It's
in a
vague
dream
enough.
paradigm, but it doesn't actually leave you anywhere.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's a metaphor.
It's like-
You say it's a
as
dream,
opposed
it's easy
descriptive.
to make a subtle leap that actually means something.
Right. It's supposed to be a metaphor.
You've actually acquired a piece of information.
I see. Yes. Right.
It's like God or something like that.
Well, if
Something similar.
that would suggest if we're referring to what we typically call dreaming, as in dreaming sleep,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's nice to use all these
Metaphors.
references as metaphors or parables or
Yeah.
analogies or what have you, and leave it at that,
Mhm.
because it doesn't give one the pseudo
Yeah.
limitation of that it actually is anything in particular.
It's not meant to be descriptive, is all.
Yeah.
It's meant to be
Well,
a
that's the point.
metaphor.
Yeah, this is
Because you can't
this.
describe.
Yeah, because this is undescribable, and it's if you want to try to evoke this, it's in my opinion, very important to have that be most manifest.
Yeah.
Be very wary of positive statements.
Right. Right. No
Be very
bullets,
wary of A is B.
no bullets in the chamber and no notches on the.
The belt.
Yeah.
What do you mean? I've got a few of those.
I mean, I think probably, arguably, the most subtle aspect of this to get a hold of is its ultimate unresolvability. I think it's very easy for the human mind to approach unresolvability, but to really get to ultimate unresolvability.
Yeah.
And even, of course, even self-reflective unresolvable, even that it is ultimately unresolvable is itself unresolvable.
Yes.
Well,
Right.
because there's no resolution there whatsoever.
Well,
Not necessary.
the mind and one's acquisitive nature is so easily fetishized, right? We objectify just by
Exactly.
profound habit.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
such a an unconscious assumption that there is a something out there. There
Yeah.
is a there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this here, whatever this is, and so there has to be, right,
Yeah.
a source consciousness, a mechanism by which it has come about. Yeah.
More subtly still is there's no habit. This is the trick that this uses to see itself in. See what I'm saying? The notion that there's a habit is also part of the trick of the appearancing.
Seemingly one of the seemings.
I like that.
I mean, the thing that is sort of the voidlessness and formlessness, and yet there's no invisibility, is sort of that's like the new paradigm. That it's not new, but it's sort of a more familiar paradigm these days, which leaves me just with that giant the question mark or the exclamation that's incredibly present and radiant, but it doesn't produce anything.
Yeah, it's not about anything.
It just is like
it just is.
this
Radiant presence.
apparition
Wow.
that is of no consequence, and that's really it's
Or,
incredible.
or maybe.
Or maybe that's just a passing cloud also, but
think we're approaching car attention time. Maybe we can take a break. And
Yes, I was just thinking
Right.
one of those infamous breaks that
yeah.
Time for more sugar
One
and
of those,
caffeine.
one of those
Approach
45
more
minutes,
and
5
more.
minute breaks.
When did you say we needed to do something about our vehiculars?
Probably
Before
now.
long.
Okay. So I'm gonna go do something about it now.
Thank you.
Don't thank me.
If the front car just goes to the back, the door just move up.
Yeah, that's right. We should all go
Yeah,
out
if
there
we
and
all
put a
if we all move up about 2 feet, that'll probably do it. Determine the circumference of your tire and move up half that much.
what they should do is take a picture with the time on it, a video. This way then they can see what car is still there. This way they're just looking at chalk.
Well, if
Don't-
they change
don't
the
give
chalk,
many
it'll be half
ideas.
hours.
What?
If they change the colour of the chalk, it'll be half hour. They can more or less tell you. I guess you're not going to do it.
Oh, what?
No.
Lovely chai, Ben.
Lovely? Oh, really? You want me to get more chai?
Yeah.
Is that what you want?
Yes, please.
It's lovely. Could be stronger all the way around, but it's
I
lovely.
agree.
I like my chai so smooth stand up.
It's really good.
But it's delicious. I mean, that's right. I would just say because it was strong.
Next time, I'm gonna taste the free chai. If I can stand it, then it's not strong. You know, like the
Oh,
water mixer should be
I agree with
really.
you. No, it should be
Because that
strong.
water mixer, I'm like, oh, that tastes good. She tastes good.
Yeah, it should be too strong.
Since I
Jeffrey,
upgraded
you
my
doing the
operating
car?
system on my
I did it already.
Oh, good.
It crashes all the time when I try to.
He's doing it. It's good,
Really
man.
irritating.
Which one did you?
Because he's the 4S and then I stopped upgrading it after the first time I upgraded it to the 5S operating system.
Yeah, yeah.
And it wasn't happy.
There's some pretty other studies that can do
I held off on going to iOS 6 for the longest time. Finally, they got most of the bugs worked out. So,
You have a 5S?
5.
5S. Yeah, well the operating system for the 5 is just too much operating system for the 4.
Right.
It swamps it. You know?
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
So basic stuff is slow.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
It's so frustrating. Yeah. It's supposed to really not only just look really nice, but also work really well.
Yeah.
Function, yeah. Yeah. So the pano feature on my camera here always crashes. It crashes like 2 or 3 times.
Well, I think it depends on what
It's
you're
really
doing.
irritating.
I think that
Right now it'll probably crash because I'm trying to do a panorama here.
Okay.
ultimately a realized being does everything for the benefit of everyone and everything. But there's not necessarily
It's much fun.
what that benefit needs to look like.
Not true,
Are you walking your deed?
Oh, I love it.
Wait a minute, that shouldn't happen.
Did you get your import?
You know,
I did. I got a card reader.
Yeah.
Not the kind of it's super fast and everything,
Wrote a whole
but still works. Yeah.
It's just great.
I've always had this sort of this whole universe of
But, you know, it really improves the experience.
but the bottom line is that kind
You can actually get it onto your computer right now. Rather than having to take it to your office.
practice, what happens, and check for yourself. I mean, having said that, I don't know any realized beings who I'm aware of as being spirit. But I hesitate to go out to get philosophical about that.
They go through it. It's been documented on many levels here.
That's great. Wow, that's awesome.
then I usually photograph and text them to leave.
Nope, no signs.
Okay, down here.
Peter Storkey says, very good.
Oh, good.
I asked him how the audio video is doing.
You know what makes the difference is the,
Yeah, I've been there.
what really makes the difference is plugging
No,
this
and I think
recorder into
he would
the
have because I
audio.
held it all for the
I think
road.
so too.
You have to get it
This
done.
is Francis Road that's covered.
That's Peter Storkey says,
It's
audio
this old
video, very
ancient
good,
thing that's
man.
like saying,
Tell the boss.
So who's the boss? Oh yeah, the boss, right. Of course, who's the boss? Need I ask, who's the boss?
I
That's
teach you.
great.
Who's the boss? The man you worship. He said, you're the one.
Right.
I had a moment to see you yesterday. We were leaving and I wanted to say something and you just said to me, and I said, you know, and I wanted to say something, and then all of a sudden I said, oh shit, you know, that woman you married to, what's her name? I mean, the woman I adore, or no, the woman I worship. Oh, he worship? This is a problem. No, but I said your name before he could say it, so I thought, oh thank God I say it face. Oh. You know who you're talking about, that's all that counts. The people. The people. You know, the peeps.
Certainly there are places.
Okay, we're having more dessert.
I just poured it tea.
Where's the pear?
I don't know where I put it.
Poured what?
I just poured it tea.
Oh, right there.
There it is, yeah, that's it.
Is that you?
Yeah. See, actually.
Let's see, I want to try some of that pear stuff, cheese stuff, sauce stuff.
The Roman wing. They actually were there. You feel like coming across your face.
You walk around the whole day and you never run out of stuff.
I think Susan was right, that's what she said to me.
Yeah,
No, I think we make it.
I do.
You're absolutely right, Daryl. That's the truth.
Yeah.
Actually,
We need to eat.
I
You do good
I
food.
walk around the lake and it's almost like I'm like gesticulating and carrying on and laughing and
Yeah, that is fabulous. That one's the dark berry sort. This one's strawberry. This is bacon. Bacon. Oh my God, it's delicious. Bacon and maple syrup. And now, even though I'm not supposed to have it, I am going to have some. I don't think it's on the inside. It's just part of the stuffing, the dough. I mean, see, it's a straight donut with bits of bacon in stuck somewhere.
Bacon's just on the outside.
I think it's just I guess it's just on the outside. I don't really know. Yeah, they do make the donuts. They're enormous. Yes, they are. They're big donuts.
Now, are there special days?
Special days? Did you try the curry?
I've heard this every day. Oh, every day.
So good.
This is Johnny's Donuts on
incredible.
right before at the Centerville end of the Miracle Mile.
So good.
You know those from you might know the car dealership that does vintage cars and all that. Jack Hunt's. Where with the old? Well, you wouldn't.
Where is it from?
Oh, from the pub. It's going.
3 blocks further up.
Yeah, further towards San Anselmo. From San Rafael to San Anselmo. Or westward. Go westward, young woman. Go westward. Have you had the pears?
Yeah, the pears are ecstatic.
Ecstatic pears?
No, they're center of the universe pears, man.
I cannot disagree with you on that one.
I know everything is, but some things are more so in my book.
Yes.
Those pears are. Whew.
They're not out there. They're not here.
That's right.
Oh, there is some in the dish.
What's that?
Tell me what you think. Think right.
The dish strainer, there's some forks and such. I think Irma washed them.
It's very good. Yeah, it's very good.
Yum yum.
Incredible.
Yum
Those
yum.
tomatoes are out now.
Like, you know, maybe.
Oh, the tomatoes, yeah.
That's it.
Tomatoes
Pretty exceptional.
Beth made with the olives and the eggs, and that's very good stuff.
Altogether, it was a good meal.
Super. That's super. I'll eat it.
Damien looked so fresh.
Was he ever coming?
I thought he was. Ooh, who brought the strawberries? They're really good.
I did. They're in the house. I can't help it. You go to these stores around here.
They got good shit, don't they?
Now, where are they from?
Monterey Market.
Oh, the Monterey Market.
Yeah.
Are those the strawberries? Those strawberries we got the other night?
Yeah. But
That,
you know, I have those. Go. You know, there's too much food around.
That shape. That
Don't you buy market?
shape is.
Don't you have market for them?
The produce is really not that good. I mean, yeah, actually, well, it's much more expensive. You have to go to, you know,
Specialty
farm
stores.
stand for it.
Oh, I see.
Here it's like, holy God.
If everywhere else-
California has good produce. You can have
I'm done.
California.
That's one of the reasons we decided to stay when we came visiting.
Spectacular.
Good.
And this stuff, cheese.
Yes.
You know what? It would be good on a donut.
A donut. What are you gonna
Pears with the sauce on a donut.
Donut.
I'm just trying obvious stuff, curry because I was instructed to.
Mm.
Is it good?
It is very good. Very coconutty.
I like when you've done the donuts. I don't know if I can go backwards.
It's very easy.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, I'll do it. Fine.
It is very warm today.
There you go.
Cooler. I'll open the back bedroom door again though. That made a big difference.
So that brings more air and more.
Yeah, I had that on actually. Right in the bedroom that I went in, I opened it, but then I thought it was too loud for her. I was afraid.
What's the sauce? The dill sauce for your.
It's a vegan mayonnaise.
It's incredible.
It's a dark vegan mayonnaise plus lime juice and mustard and dill.
When did you do all this stuff?
She was up all night.
No, I was not.
That was like
I was up all night, but I didn't do that. I just
when Peter
roasted.
Brown
I
reference
roasted the yellow things last night.
Beth making the chai. He was referencing me telling you to make the chai. It's like, oh dear.
No, that I didn't. I just couldn't sleep. I wasn't doing anything.
Okay.
I was watching Turk bake the food.
What do you need, Stephen?
Just looking around for like a toothpick or something.
Well, yeah, there might be one in the drawer.
So what was the weather? Oh, hot? So it's much cooler in here, huh?
Yes.
This really does keep the.
Very much.
There you go.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes when the sun gets lower in the sky and starts coming through. But
Yeah.
I think that these are good windows. It looks like they're
The double pane.
Yeah.
And all that. Yeah, tinted. Got a slight tint. Which is kind of lovely. I like the tint looking out.
Oh no, I haven't.
Yeah, I always prefer looking at the tinted windows and the dragonfly.
you ever go to those ponds by San Rafael?
I have once. Yeah.
They have now
A few seals.
thousands of duck.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's like beaches are just full of duck.
Wow.
And it's spectacular.
Just putting
I mean,
this out.
there's just 4 or 5 different sorts of duck, but they're
Right.
but they're just the masses of them.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah, I had to get my shoes.
all the babies have grown up.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
so-
Oh, really? So is that the payment's that high?
They were super high.
Yearling.
Juveniles.
Yeah. Okay.
It's interesting.
I should definitely check it out as soon as we're done with railings. Doing more railings.
We're doing more railings.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, just on our back porch.
Are you replacing the railings? Why?
Well, because some of them were rotted, and it was getting to the point where if you lean on things, they kind of get the sense that they're going to go further than a lot further than you might want them to go.
Uh-huh.
So the whole maintenance thing. It's actually really good for me. I like working with
Yeah.
repair.
Wow. That's your whole body.
They're beautiful. These seals.
Oh, yeah.
See that seal there?
2 of them.
It's got
Yeah, we're watching it.
whole body.
The one on the back, he's just gone under, had his feet up in the air.
Oh, it's a big guy. It doesn't clear the shot too much shooting through glass?
It's not.
If you were going for the National Geographic, you'd go outside.
Yes.
That's what I'm wondering, because I know you are.
No, I'm just having fun. Oh, there we go. Okay. I think I might have to actually do the whole go outside thing.
That's a good angle now.
Yeah.
I hope it's not too horrible for you having your shades up.
Oh, no, it's got such a gorgeous view.
Oh, it's incredible.
Easy slip-on type thing.
Yep, indeed.
So much action out there today, too.
Yeah, it's a perfect day.
Sunday.
Absolutely lovely day.
I never understood the idea of pleasure of sitting on a piece of wood with a cloth over your head sailing around the bay. Well, boats, you know.
I used to be a sailor.
Yeah.
I think it's about being on the water and also participating with the elements, because when you're sailing, when you really get into the sort of the zen of it, there's the wind and the wind and the movement of the water and the whole thing, and you're sort of balanced between it. It's a lot like a balance beam in a certain way. Especially when you're controlling the boat, because then the angle of the sails and the angle of the boat relative to the wind, which is continually shifting, and all of that is it's like a balancing act. It's an art form. I imagine it's a lot like surfing, where you're sort of balancing where your weight is and where the wave's going. No, me neither. Sounds like
When
a
I
lot of
ask my
work.
son to explain it, he does various things, but sometimes he'll start talking about all the different variables that are involved.
Oh yeah.
There's just like everything is a variable.
No, it's a continually dynamic system,
Right.
and an artful sailor finds the sweet spot with all of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My ex-father-in-law used to sail, and he was all for pressure, and he would just say, the pressure of the wind going here and there, and was to him continuously fascinating.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think sailors are like that, because you're basically dancing with the wind, and to a lesser extent with the water.
That could be quite a good metaphor for, you know, sort of this participation, you know.
Of course, sure.
All those variables, everything, and then everything that you do, so to speak, is also a variable in the variables. It's not just that there are variables; it's that.
It's participatory, yeah.
And even the participation becomes its own.
Sure, of course.
Becomes a whole infinity of variables. So. Very beautiful.
This guy used to race sailing boats. And then he said, you know, I came to the conclusion that actually what I want to do is go out into the middle of the straits where they were and drink a cup of tea. I didn't want to race anymore. So he sold his racing boat and got somewhere in a little cabin.
Yeah, racing is a little contrived because it's, you know, it's because it's basically competitive. But, you know, whatever. Whatever floats your boat, as they say.
This particular place, they had a special sort of boat they made just for this
regarding the tenor of our earlier conversation today, it's very pleasant being in the company of relatively advanced yogis and being able to, to be with this in a more multidimensional, open-ended, less heavy-handedly targeted mode.
We have you to thank.
Yeah, I was feeling much the same kind of thing. Kind of just like a great spa, a great bath. I was going to say a possibility, but it's sort of possibility that is always just as it is.
Yeah. Open-endedness is a word that I like. Sort of a luscious actual open-endedness.
Yeah.
An actual unlocked-endedness. Open-endedness, I mean, literal unlimitedness is quite palpable and quite actual. It's not a mere abstraction. It's a palpable actuality.
The only sense of it being an abstraction is from some sense of limitation. When you're hanging out in unlimited, it doesn't seem to me anyway. It doesn't seem actually very odd at all. Just
What context can we place demonstrative samadhis in? The reason being is, you look to Hindu yogic culture, not so much Buddhist culture because they're just so staid to the point of boredom, but at least in Hindu yogic culture, there's such joy or appreciation placed on demonstrative samadhis, this transhuman yogic thing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give an example of a demonstrative samadhi?
Look at a picture of Ramakrishna, in a form of rigor mortis, with his hands in, spontaneous mudra, apparently unconscious of what we're referring to as the world.
Well, it's just that it's a sacramental participation in the depth of the transcendental nature of this, which is both the fruit of yoga and the path of yoga.
Yeah.
It's engagement with the actuality of this as it is.
Yeah.
And in the more explicitly yogic traditions, like many or most perhaps of the Indian yogic traditions, they're very explicit orientation. Our orientation might be argued to be a little more implicit in terms of demonstrative, as you put it.
Yeah.
but that's just splitting hairs, and it's arbitrary ultimately.
We were talking about earlier about walking around the lagoon talking to yourself. Is that a demonstrative samadhi?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. In this culture, yes, it would be.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's not that important then what occurs somatically.
Of course not.
Yeah.
And that it tends to be more or less an accident of individual nature and social tradition and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, like for example, the Indian yogis are all in a tradition of Indian yoga, whatever, such as it is.
Yes.
And so if
Right.
they're immersed in certain people who tend to do certain things in certain ways, loosely speaking,
Mm-hmm.
then they may have a tendency to sort of approach it in terms of that sort of a paradigm.
Yeah.
Again, depending upon individual nature and so on and so forth.
Sure. Yeah, it might be more demonstrative in Vedic culture than necessarily in.
You know, I mean,
West.
my whole approach is that the nature of spirituality turns out to not depend upon any particular expression.
Yeah.
And so that being the case, I you know, aspire to, or have sort of resonated with a more Rosicrucian ideal of, you know, when in Rome, you can approach this stuff in terms of any social norm,
Yeah.
or norm of social behaviors and expressions and so on, and still have that be viable and profoundly, you know, unlimitedly in-depth engagement with yoga.
Yeah. That's right. It's the engagement that counts, not necessarily the ingress or the apparent mode of ingress. Yeah.
Because this, some people wrong. No, it can't look like that.
Yeah, really.
I'm sorry, that's too much. That's too far.
Yeah, really.
They're stabbing each other in the chest.
Chest, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Or really
There's a whole bunch of enlightened chemtrail pilots.
Yeah.
or enjoying their luxury.
But it seems to, you know, as far as I'm aware, it seems to be relatively rare information that is the case. It seems to be relatively rare information in terms of just sort of explicit superficial information culturally, that it is possible to engage with and discover profound transcendental reality
Yes.
outside of a context of behavioral,
Yeah.
you know, parameters.
Yeah.
That
That
seems
awake
to
is
be
possible is rare. That awake is possible just as you are is even more rare.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the assumption that, oh, I need to, you know, get an Indian name, or I need to, you know, get a funny haircut, or I need to behave this way, or I need to behave that way.
Yeah.
You know, it's just totally fallacious, and that little piece of information seems to be so rare to encounter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, how these kinds of fundamentalisms or superstitions have become so profoundly.
Change it, or modify it, or amend it, or correct it, or purify it, or whatever, right?
Yeah, and it's a vanishing point. It's
Yeah,
like-
totally, of course.
Tide's coming up.
Mm.
Peter, one time you used to talk about your earlier experience, I think, as sort of almost having like two tracks where there would be a very non-linear kind of open-ended experience at the same time as, I guess, a kind of what you call maybe consensus worldview type experience as well.
Yeah, it seemed to be like that for a long time for me.
Yeah. Part of the reason I'm asking is because it sort of feels to me like sort of world of manifestation seems quite vivid and so forth, as in a way as it always has been. But there's also this growing sense of much that isn't really that in any way that I've ever thought of it before.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a problem I'm having really, it's just I'm kind of curious. The whole quality of something being something, not necessarily even a thing, but just being real or there. The more that this kind of other sense of things seems to be growing, that quality seems to have less and less meaning or reality. And so it's I'm just wondering if that's sort of similar in some way to what you were experiencing at that point, and then
I don't know. I mean, for me, I had a palpable and very concrete experience of absolute open-endedness and absolute transcendence. And of course I had, my immediate and very vivid experience of sensory, concrete actuality and so on and so forth. The specificity, you might say. And I couldn't see clearly the way in which those were both the same thing. I mean, I guess, you could say sort of, in principle, you could say I hadn't integrated the truth of paradox. I couldn't see that this is both A and not A, and that's a non-issue. For me, that was an issue. I could see the not A very palpably. I could see the A very palpably, and it was like, okay, that's weird. But I couldn't see. It was almost like sort of a classical dualism, like in Christianity, where there's heaven and earth, God and man, or whatever. I don't know what, but it was sort of this astounding transcendental ideal liberated realm that I could see palpably was actual, real, concrete, and I was that. But at the same time, I was here being this human being and living my shitty life and with semi-functionality and so on and so forth. And I couldn't, it was somehow there was a disjunction there. But this is just my own personal experience. There's no reason to suppose that that's relevant to anyone but me. But I didn't have the benefit of any clarifying overview. I was kind of on my own in this experience, and I had no authorities I respected to get any clarification from in terms of refining that or getting an understanding on what was going on with that. But fortunately, I did stumble up. Sooner or later, I stumbled on the point of integration of it all.
Mm-hmm. But you must have known that there was some validity to that internal.
Oh, there was no doubt about that whatsoever. Mm. I just couldn't see what it had to do with
anything,
with normalcy, with the details, with with being a human being. And I finally the two basically bridged. I saw, oh, this is that is this. It's just really weird that that's the case, but it is actually the case. And then okay, but I could see how that I could see very clearly how that is the case. All of which I basically express and share in my conversations with you all and so on, from various points of view. But I had to come to that for myself to see it clearly. I mean, for 20-some years I was stuck in, well, yeah, there is this astounding transcendental infinity, and I am that, but I was also this human being, and they just didn't, it just was apples and oranges. It was like living in two worlds simultaneously.
Which you obviously continued to do, but you didn't have the conflict about it.
Oh, you mean now?
Yeah.
Well, but it's not two worlds now. I now listen to the same world.
Okay.
It's just really weird.
Yeah, so it's just
I saw how I came to how weird it is. I came to how weird it is. I was thinking it made sense, and so I was clinging to some subtle expectation that it was going to make sense in some way.
Oh, I see. Flip into one
or maybe that it just didn't make sense and was just a disjunction that was just somehow there, and but then I had I stumbled upon or developed the insight to see the way in which the specificity and the indeterminacy are one and the same. You know, I mean, which I've, you know, spoken with you all at great length and from many angles about for a long time.
I have been looking back this feeling, and it's nearly knowledge, but it's not knowledge, that there was an understanding many years ago, but I didn't recognize it for what it is. But I can see it now looking back. I didn't see it then, but now looking back I can see that I knew the truth always. But previously I didn't have that awareness. But now I'm very much aware that when I was 14 and 15 and onwards, 13 probably, I have had that awareness with me all the time.
And I think that's the norm. I think the problem in spirituality is recognition. It's not that people don't have profound engagement with actuality. It's that they don't recognize it or appreciate it as what it is.
But during those times, I went looking for that. And I barked up many the wrong tree.
Haven't we all?
Yeah, and I guess I peed on quite a few of those trees on the way. It was a battle from many aspects.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Stupid, but in retrospect.
Well, the path of coming to intelligence looks like stupidity.
Yeah. But of course it's not.
No.
Nothing is stupid.
No.
Or everything is stupid.
I'm not sure which, but I know it's one or the other.
It's
Or
one
both.
I'm too stupid to know the difference.
Is it possible that one is fooling themselves as they used to in recognition of what seemingly is seeing through? I mean,
There's
it could be an endless kind of seeing.
Well, it is.
through.
It's always fooling itself. It's always presented with endless seemings, you know, of sort of promises or innuendos or suggestions of completeness, of finality, none of which ever actually pan out. But that's its mode. That is the mode of actuality, that it presents that way. You know, it's continually presenting with these infinite veils and promises and suggestions of being this way or being this or that or the other, with absolute instability and dynamism, just continually, just all these little, you know, I mean, we call it the stream of consciousness or the flow of thoughts or the, you know, just the cascade of intuitions and inspirations that we all experience continually, you know. But that's how this shows up. I mean, that's the calling card of actuality, is all of these seemings, none of which are final, none of which are complete, none of which are actual resolutions. But seeing that non-finality, seeing that the seemings are
Endless.
they're endless, and they're lies in their pretension of completeness, because the fact of the unresolvability of this, which is manifest once you see it, once you discover it, then you get that these seemings are just like, they're like dreams, they're fantasies, they're little partial perspectives of, you know, which are profound and meaningful and full of insight and full of juiciness and so on and so forth, but none of them are final. None of them are complete. None of them are stable. None of them are, you know, an actual resolution or achievement.
They're not the whole story.
Yeah, they're never the whole story. And yet they present themselves as if they might be. There's always this sort of promise, this hint of, wow, it could be like, it could all like be, it could be like this, it could all be like that, it could all be like this. And we all think this continually. We're having, you know, thoughts of our feeling, intuitions of self-image, intuitions of others, intuitions of situations, and just this continual cascade of, you know, of takes on things, little vignettes of, little insights of, oh, things are kind of like this in this context, or whatever the specifics are, right? And these things flow through and then flash and are replaced with other nuance, and I mean, it's just this continual cascade, you know, completely unstable. But none of it is final. You know, and it is clearly discoverable that that's so. It's not a leap of faith or a philosophical position of logic or something. You know, when you get the texture of the way these things present themselves, you see they're all sort of fuzzy around the edges and dreamlike and ghostly and unstable, and they sort of come in like this and then they're gone, and so they seem to, you know, if you don't look at them head on, they seem to be very concrete and well developed and intelligent and lots of detail and all that, but then when you look closer you discover it's all a little kind of like movie sets, you know, it's all, don't look around the backside or you'll see all the gaffer tape and chewing gum that holds it together. I mean, the ongoing self-deception is the very nature of this. I mean, you know, I think one of the real powerful contributions in spirituality is the whole notion of Maya. You know, it's so profoundly right on the money. You know, this continual barrage of seemings that have the promise of being actual, and none of them actually hold up.
They're like the building blocks.
Yeah. They're the building blocks, but nothing's being built of them. Just a promise, an innuendo is being built of them. When you see that nothing's being built of them, the whole thing is just you know, it's a delightful shower, refreshing, you know, being out in the refreshing spring rain of lies and innuendo. I mean, yeah, it's really all about the nature and the context of stream of consciousness. You know, as you just sit and watch you experience for a couple of minutes and watch, you know, to see these endless little flashings and little, oh, this is this, oh, this is that, and then you have a memory, and then you have a fantasy, and then you have it. I mean, it's just this kind of dancing around with all of these, not really complete, but partially holographic, you know, points of view, perspectives that seem to be a certain way. You know, and in human normalcy, this sort of stream of consciousness, even though it doesn't really hold together, is sort of held to be actual, more or less. You know, and people are off in their fantasy of what's going on and what they're doing and why they're here and what they think of everyone around them and what everyone around them thinks of them and all this stuff, which is basically just free associated instantly and incoherently. But when you notice that instantaneousness and that incoherence, and that all of this eventfulness is occurring in a context which is very amorphous but very actual, that is also very palpably a part of the you know, the stew, part of the milieu, then you get the actual perspective on this. This isn't This is a profound actual unresolvability with an endless cascade of seeming innuendos, seemings, suggestions or implications of ways it might be that it never actually resolves to. And it's just always like that. This experience is always like that.
What about stillness?
What about it?
That
It's another seeming. It's a fantasy. Stillness can't be found as definable or as resolvable relative to some non-stillness.
Well, it seems like a permutation of the stream, that it
Sure.
stops and that there's this.
Yeah, but it doesn't ever really stop. It's just a matter of different degrees of density or different degrees of of sort of bandwidth of information. There can be very heavy-handed, gross information. There can be very subtle background hint fluctuation of, cosmic background radiation level of information, and then more. But it's all the same thing. It's not an actual stopping. It's relative. It's sort of different degrees of density. This never stops. This never presents as nothing. It never presents as an absolute zero. Never. It can present as inconceivably rarefied and delicate. Like if you have a general anesthesia or something, it's virtually nothing relative to the usual gross barrage, right? But if you look very closely, it's not. It never is actually zero. It's just very subtle. So it's just different densities, and this supposition of hierarchy that fine density is better than gross density or something it turns out to be just another supposition, just another posturing. It's a stance, because it's all the same thing.
One seems to be a refinement that's not available with the conventional relationship or experience of the mind, of consciousness, or the stream.
Well, if you're referring to conventional relationship as holding it to be actual and holding the unresolved cascade of innuendos to be concrete, then certainly, it can be very liberating to find yourself outside that, and it is liberating to find yourself outside that. But of course, the truth is you're always outside that, because the fact that you're in that or stuck in that is a fantasy. Holding that your thoughts actually are concrete or actually are about anything that's actually there, that this or that matters, and this or that you're stuck in, and this or that is an obligation, and this and that, or the idea of these fixed karmic patterns that we're trapped in short, is, it turns out not to hold water when you look at what's actually going on experientially. I mean, that's a fantasy. That's a supposition which exists only in imagination about this never-ending cascade of half-thoughts and half-viewpoints, none of which ever stick around with any stability, or none of which ever resolve into any coherence, even though they have the implication that they might. And of course, if you don't look closely, then you fall into the habit of normalcy, the habit of consensus reality, just assuming it's all true. And then you live in a real world, and you're a real person, and you have real relationships and real obligations, and you're stuck in all that, and oh my God, how do I get out of this? How do you get out of hell? But of course the trick is you're not actually there, and it's discoverable and noticeable that you're not if you take the trouble to look closely.
But just like we were saying before, it's knowable sometimes after the fact. I mean, the process of Maya is that it does take over. Even when you know that what it is,
Sure.
it disguises itself.
Mine never lets up.
No.
Mine's a badass bitch.
Yes.
And she's a lot of fun.
No, mine never lets up, and the whole path of unfoldment consists of finding of having a profound insight and going, wow, there's something else going on here, and then getting lost again, and then sooner or later you come to a point of, wow, there's something going on here, and then you get lost again. But each of those intervals, the nature of it is each of those intervals over an arbitrary period of time and an arbitrary, period, an arbitrary frequency, depending on your nature, tend to get shorter and shorter, and the intervals of recognition tend to get longer and longer. But the path of unfoldment looks exactly like that, like getting lost and then going, oh shit, wow, I did it again, for a day or a week or a month or a year or a lifetime, and have me again. But wow, there's something else going on here. Wow, it's amazing. And what was I thinking just now? And yeah, it can look like that, but it has its own trajectory and its own arc, and ultimately you can't contrive it unless you can. And then that's cool too. But even to be at a point where you're having that insight and finding yourself outside of that to any degree, puts you ahead of the herd. I mean, I suppose statistically, the majority and perhaps even the vast majority of people don't even have a clue that there's anything more going on than they think is going on, and who they think they are and what they think they're stuck in and what they think their life is.
Or if they do, they're based on stories that they've been taught.
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever, yeah.
Right.
And of course that's not even really true, because again, everyone has insight or intuition or revelation about this. But it's a question of having sufficient maturity in terms of being along in your own arc of unfoldment, where you build up a more explicit momentum in these kinds of revelations or what have you, I suppose.
I think it's more what, I don't think you can contrive it, I used that word a little earlier, but more like what John was saying, that some of us, and maybe even all of us, have some experience in our early life that we know, oh shit, this is something, it's important, or it's notable. And we don't recognize it unless somehow or other our good fortune, karma, temperament leads us on a path where we even think to, or it's hard for me to use the words that we think to do something or another, because the thought comes to us.
Yeah, of course.
From wherever, the same place that all thoughts come from, and what that is we can't say. So,
Sure.
the best I could describe is good fortune,
Sure.
to recognize it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that recognition is not something you can contrive and you can't work
No, of course.
towards, because that effort is it either happens or it doesn't happen, and it's part of this thing that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, sure. No, for sure. Revelation is the very nature of the radiance. Revelation is the very nature of what this is. Revelation is continually occurring to everyone. How could it not, But again, it's about recognition or appreciation, which of course is where unfoldment comes in. Realization is just nothing other than that recognition or appreciation, and it certainly approaches, it has a tendency to approach by degrees. So it can seem to be sort of a process of progressive realizations that may be progressively deeper, or progressively longer lasting, or progressively more frequent, or what have you.
That and the sense of being lost is kind of like, okay, so what? This is fun too.
Sure. Yeah, but that's an advanced degree of unfoldment. That's when you're over the hump and you're coasting downhill. The beginning of the upward path of yoga is like a path of discrimination, where you're separating out delusion and confusion, and then when you're over the hump, the downward path is one of integration of delusion and confusion. It's just like, oh, okay, this is cool too. Look, this is it too. Look, this is it too. And so you end up back right where you started, but with a big smile on your face instead of a pissed off frown.
It's so
I do. Big smile on my face.
Because really, it's exactly the same energy, the same construction.
It's all paradoxical. The fantasy is everything's going to be solved and changed, and the reality is none of it matters at all. And
by virtue of that, everything is changed.
Yeah, well,
because
everything has changed because it turns out not to be the way you thought it was, because you were wrong.
Rosy glasses with the shades.
Thank God. I mean, this very oppositional nature of the whole arc of yoga is always a challenge, and is endlessly befuddling, because in the first arc Maya's the enemy, and you're busy deconstructing it and pulling it apart and disproving it and all that, and in the second half, Maya is the pimp of the absolute that's just continually providing a luscious interface of transcendence. Sloppy analogy, but we'll go with it because it's got a significant humor factor.
That's nice.
And so at one point, you're sort of demonizing a principle, and at another point you're surrendering to it and relaxing with it and including it and welcoming it. And so it can seem to be completely opposite.
Yeah.
And so it's really and parsing it as if it's actually two separate arcs and they're actually separate is heavy-handed too, because it's not necessarily like that. All of these different modes just are jumbled together in the usual unresolvable chaos that the intelligence just sort of taps into when it does.
Well, kind of looking at experience, say, without the benefit of unresolvability, when in that mode, it may seem like all this push me pull you stuff going on, but that's not really what's occurring.
Right.
I mean, there's huge, gigantic spaces and vistas and all sorts of things.
Sure.
Maybe you're not particularly aware of it, quote, quote, in some way, or maybe you're even struggling with what seems like all this opposition, but, that's, as I look at this, it just seems like there's so much room.
Yeah. Well, when you have the sensitivity to notice that, to perceive that, then obviously that's clearly the case.
But it was still true even when I wasn't
Absolutely.
perceiving it as much.
But the addiction to reifying the seemings makes the inconsistencies sort of relatively relegated to the background, and the seeming reified worldview concreteness comes to the foreground. It's a kind of a, even though in reality they coexist, but it's like a signal to noise thing where the one is biased towards what the
Whole thing. Correct.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like our bodies are just this incredible, who knows what's going on. All this symphony of stuff, and the experience is like that too. I think in that.
Oh yeah.
We may not be aware of it as that, and it's a joy to have that quality of experience, but at the same time, we live it like that, I think. It lives like that.
Yeah.
It is free in and of itself.
Oh yeah. Every, all form whatsoever is the inconceivable process of the functionality of the inherent intelligence. So even what we're defining as our stuckness and our problem and our enemy and our shitty self-image, and then the path of discovering beyond that, and then the path of realization, and so on and so forth. Every aspect of that seems to be so different is actually exactly the same profound process of this function, of this inconceivable transcendental function of the inherent intelligence. It's all inconceivably right on the money, on purpose. It's like it's doing its thing, and it just looks like all these different, weird aspects and so on and so forth.
So Peter, what's funny to me is that, I was getting glimmers of what you just said, for many years, and wanting it to be like that. And then when I finally went, wait a minute, God fucked up. What the hell? Why would you create something that couldn't see what was true? That's just insane. Why would you do that? And when I yeah. Then that was more so. Once I realized that God had actually fucked up. Even though that's not really true. But it just
And there wasn't any God anyway, so.
Yeah. All things to all people at all times.
It's not my fault after all.
No,
I
for
didn't
sure.
fuck up. I'm not a little, poor little thing over here. No, God fucked up.
Yeah.
That's what I've been telling my parents.
They just didn't get it. Now there was a terrible thing that used to really bug me as a kid. All my virtues were by God's grace, but my sins were my own. And one day I said to my father, no. If God's going to take responsibility for my virtues, He gets my sins. But if I get my sin, I get my virtues. So, okay, let's get this straight. Can't have it both ways. He didn't like it much.
It all comes together when you get the idea that, when you get the understanding that God is a narcissistic auto-buggerer. God's idea of process is to fuck itself in the ass. So to speak. Loosely speaking.
New church.
Okay.
Kids, don't try that at
Ouch.
These people are trained professionals.
Let's just admit that from the recording.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I don't know what you heard, but that's not what I said.
Domini, you're all Catholic.
we're all adults here. I can see we're going to need to have a disclaimer form put in front of the YouTube. By accessing these videos, I state that I am over 18 or an adult in the jurisdiction of my watching, and otherwise agree to hold the content provider non-liable for emotional and spiritual damage.
That won't stop you being sued by God.
Well,
No.
In contemporary conventional exploration of the mind, of the continual subconscious conversation, the approach is to just change it from negative to positive. And the shifting from negative to positive alters the whole story.
well, it may or may not, but that may or may not. But the supposition that positive is better than negative is itself a profound bias that is ultimately going to be confusing, because negativity per se, in some sense, or perhaps in any sense, is not eliminatable. Ultimately, if you define it as no good, you're going to end up trying to do some kind of suppression, which will not eliminate it, and then you're stuck with what do you do with the trash? You know, I mean, this is a very commonplace problem, of course, in many spiritual and ethical and moral traditions play good off against bad, and it's a big conundrum, because human nature is what it is. Human nature comes in, you know, full spectrum. So strategically, even though that may be an interesting strategy to play with in order to try to, you know, restructure one's mindset, it's not necessarily going to be of any benefit in terms of coming to see what the actual event is, which is more structural than qualitative. In other words, the stream of consciousness and the stream of consciousness's actual occurrence is what's interesting in terms of realization, rather than the apparent contents of the stream of consciousness, whether it's positive or negative, liberated or entrapped or whatever. That's not the point so much as the point of, well, what is this stream of consciousness? How is it happening? What's it made of? You know, what's the physics of the thing? What's the structure of the thing? What's the substance of the thing? What's the energy of the thing? Sort of get into it on the ground floor structurally. You know, which ultimately, of course, it has nothing to do with the content. Content is not really relevant in terms of those considerations. And as long as we're interested in content and playing with content, we're liable to be distracted away from this fundamental fact. I mean, you know, playing value games with content is human normalcy. You know, I mean, then you're in political, you know, political biases or religious biases or all these biases that you know, go Niners. I mean, all of this tribal identification, which is all, you know, playing content off against itself, as opposed to seeing, well, what is this content? What's it made of? Where's it coming from? How's it happening? And that is where, you know, undercuts. You get to sort of to the machine language of your experience rather than just what software happens to be running.
Well, possibly on some level, if you change the structure so significantly, it at least provides an opportunity to see the structure, because
Perhaps.
I mean, before it just seemed like you're just a victim, and whatever happens is what you have to deal with. And then suddenly to know that you can actually change the content shows up the structure as being
Yeah, it might.
not as inviolable as
Sure.
previously. I don't know.
It definitely can be. I mean, it's like we were talking about earlier, magic versus liberation. You know, magic can definitely be, you know, you're getting into a higher order of relationship with your experience when you enter into a magical engagement with it, i.e., you know, spin doctoring your own experience, you know, shifting, being able to jump paradigms. That can be very powerful, but ultimately it can be its own dead end, and it can be its own seduction, and probably many people get sucked into that level of orienting, which is fine, but it's fundamentally not liberating. And as long as one is seduced into that as an end, that will be the end, which will be essentially more of the same, just on a sort of another level up.
Well, I wonder if there are infinite variabilities of the structure.
Well, perhaps. Yeah, sure, of course, but there may or may not be, but that's not the point. The point is to get to the carrier wave.
Right.
Because all of this other stuff is basically playing with content on various levels. You know, and liberation and realization is found at the carrier wave, at the level of what it is, what it's made of, what's doing it, rather than what's being done, or how it's presenting, or what this plot line is. But as you say, it's a subtle interrelationship, and through being artful with your orientation to content, you can definitely bootstrap into jumping off into being more with it more fundamentally in terms of discovery. But again, as with anything, it's less a matter of what you do than the intelligence with which you do it.
So, with the carrier wave, perhaps there's an infinite way of looking at that
There is. Its very nature is.
Receiving that.
Yeah, its very nature. I mean, that's Maya. Its very nature is to spin off of these infinities endlessly.
So as the carrier wave, you're talking about the experience of the process, the experience of experience.
Yes. The experience of experience. Which, of course, undercuts what that happens to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's all about what experiencing experience, or noticing. And that's what's powerful, that's what's liberating. You know, you're basically undercutting content. You're cutting to how can content even show up. And so, of course, that can be played with in the presence of any apparent content, because that's a constant in that.
Oh, there it is again.
There it is again. Still. Again. Still. Again. Still. Is it still or is it again? More seemings.